morning? Great. Well, hey, first things first, because of the nature of what we're doing, we want people up close. And so if you guys could move up close, that would be awesome. And we will get, every now and then, we will get updates on your favorite football score from today, okay? So you don't have to hide in the back. We got you covered. But we want to make it interactive. We want it to be like a conversation. And so, again, you don't have to sit on the front or anything like that, but we want to make sure that it accomplishes what we're going for today, which is just to be helpful. And before we get started this morning, it's exciting just for our church to have this kind of response. I believe as of yesterday, we had 64 adults signed up for this morning, and we already have 14 kids that are here. And so it's pretty cool that you guys would make this a priority. And because you've made it a priority, what our priority is this morning and today is just to be real helpful. And so I'm certainly not an expert on marriage, and you'll probably hear that a lot this morning. So I hope you're excited to make fun of us and our mistakes and things like that. Disclaimer-wise, you're going to hear things that we believe are true, period. And then at times you're going to hear things that we have found to be true for us. By that, we don't mean that truth is relative, but there are just ways, in fact, even for the people who are two couples that are going to be up here, we have even found different ways to accomplish good things for our marriage. But sometimes it looks a totally different way that we go about accomplishing those things. And so what I want to do, I want to pray for us. Then I'll ask my wife, Shauna, Ken and Kelly McCord to join me up here, and we will get started. So let's pray, and then we'll go for it. God, I thank you so much for today. God, I thank you for what you're doing in our church. God, I thank you for this idea of marriage and, God, what it can mean for us, whether we're single or just married or looking forward to getting married or not married, God, whatever the case may be. I pray that you would give us clarity today. God, I pray that you would speak through us. God, I pray that we could be helpful for one another. And God, we look forward to seeing what you're going to do this day. God, we pray you'll be with the kids. They would have a good time this morning. God, I pray that the air conditioning would come on sooner than later. And God, we pray for your favor over every person in this room, God, over every relationship, past, present, and future that's represented. And God, we ask for your wisdom. And God, would you protect us from things that will keep us from being wise, especially related to marriage. In Jesus' name, amen. You guys, come on up. All right, so my name is Ben, Ken McCord, Kelly McCord, Shauna Pilgreen, and what we're going to do is first just share a little bit of our story, and then really get into why marriage, and then you guys have submitted some tremendous questions. In addition to the questions that you've already submitted, what we want you to know is that we're okay with you guys asking questions that will be pertinent to the conversation. If it's a question that you ask later on this morning where it's like, we probably need to have that in a one-on-one conversation, we'll let you know that. Let me let you know another thing that's going to come today. We've started to think about, like, how do we want to organize today, and feeling like we could talk for hours and even days about the subject matter. We're going to do a lot in here all together, but at some point in time, depending on how things flow, and you guys know I'm super structured and not flexible. I'm very flexible. At some point in time, how we're going to have lunch together today. When we do that, you need to get your kids, bring them in here, let them eat with you, hang out with other people. And then at some point in time today, we're going to divide up into just men and women. And so if you have things that come up in what we're saying this morning that would pertain to this kind of group, make a note of that. And if it's a question that, hey, that'd probably be better to ask in a group of women, both in married and single women, then save it for that or for the men as well. Because we all know that there are some things that we want to be with, that it's just wise to be with the same gender as we begin to talk about the topic. And so, you want to start first? You want to share? All right, I'll start first. So, real quick, for Shauna and I, we met while we were in college, but we didn't go to college at the same place. We met doing a youth summer camp in the summer of 1999. I was dating someone else at the time. In fact, when my girlfriend would come to the camp that we were working at, she would stay with Shauna because Shauna and I had got to be good friends, and that wasn't weird at all. Did not start dating Shauna or even really interested in a romantic way until I had ended things with that girl. But I will say this, I I was dating that girl, and we don't need to, God rest her soul. She doesn't need to be brought up in this setting. But here's what I did say. She's still alive. And she's married to a doctor, and she's doing fine. All right? What's awesome is that Brad Kill, our worship leader, dated this same girl also. And if you haven't heard the story, let me just give you a little bit of it. One day she gives me this poem. I can remember it. It was a framed poem. It was on light blue paper. It was typed out in black ink. And it was a very sweet poem, but I started thinking, wait, I don't play the guitar. Wasn't really anything in there about the guitar, but she had written a poem for Brad when they were dating. They ended their relationship. They never had a chance to give it to him. And rather than come up with something fresh for me, she literally gave me a printed out, framed version of what she had written to Brad. And so, but I will say this, whenever I met Shauna that summer, it certainly was a thing of, hey, if girls like this exist, I didn't think Shauna specifically, but just if girls like this exist, wouldn't I be settling if I stayed in the relationship that I am in? And so that really began a train of thought for me, and I did end the relationship with this girl. Shauna and I did start dating. We started dating in October, but because of my internship, we didn't have our first date until December of 1999. 1999, right?
Because I'm in Virginia.
Shauna's in Virginia. I was living in Louisiana at the time. We're both in college. Me, my last semester, doing an internship at a hospital. She's got another semester left after the fall of 1999. We dated long distance, and then we got married the following December. So I had our first date December 1999. We got married December 2000. Had never lived in the same state or even time zone as each other. And I thought, man, I'm awesome, she's awesome. Marriage is going to be easy and awesome. And there won't be much to get used to, even though we've never dated in the same city. So why don't you give them your version of that?
That was a fast version. I think for me, growing up...
That's a marriage lesson right there. Right? Communication. If it's 1,000 words or 10 words and you can say the same thing, 10.
And he is grown patient in listening to my 1,000 words. But for me, growing up, marriage just seemed very easy. As I looked at my parents and saw how they did marriage, it just seemed really easy. And so that's what I saw modeled. And so when I get to college and start dating and that kind of thing, I'm thinking, this should just be easy, right? Why is it hard? Why is it like an emotional roller coaster at times? Why isn't this just easy? And I think I took the same thing into marriage, is just, okay, this should be easy, you know? I do the dishes, and then you come in, or I cook, and then you come in and clean the dishes, and then it wasn't that cut and dry. So we learned a lot, like you said, with us not even living in the same time zone. We learned a lot our first year of marriage. And I'm thankful to be where we are 12 years into it than that first year. But those years just build upon each other and have made us who we are today. But
yeah, I would say just on those early years before let Ken and Kelly share their story, I think it blindsided me because it wasn't as easy. And I really looked to marriage as a thing that would kind of cement everything that I'd probably looked for before, especially as I matured, as even in high school and college. It was something that I looked forward to. And I think I really thought that it would be pretty easy. And what happened for me in those early years is that I would speak out or against a lot of the things I saw in Shauna. But you know how hindsight's 20/20. Looking back, it's pretty crazy to me what I was actually like and how unprepared I was when this thing got going. I wanted marriage to serve me. I wanted Shauna to serve me. I wanted really it to be about me, my happiness, my free time, what I thought was best with our money. I really wanted it to be about me. And looking back, it's been an amazing story, really for us, of redemption. Because, and we're at a good place today, but it did not come automatically. It did not come without huge transformation, without huge shifts. And I'm I have such a long way to go, but I'm so grateful for who I am as a person and a husband today compared to when this thing got going. She probably shouldn't have married the boy that I was. And yes, I use boys for a reason. She probably shouldn't have married the boy that I was at that time. Thankfully, I hid it from her because we never were together. It's a true story. I mean, we're together like every day, every month, like 3 days. And I could be awesome for 3 days, right? Can't you? I mean, it's like you show up, I got my best threads on, we're going to any restaurant, because I've only got 3 days, I got to do this every month. But yeah, it's been an amazing story of redemption and just see what God's done.
And I'll even just add and say, growing up, we grew up in Georgia and Louisiana, school in Virginia. But for us, we saw our parents married young and in college. And so the culture we grew up in is you typically met and married in your college years and got married very young. And so, for me, it was you go to college, you get your education, but then you also get your husband. And that didn't play out in every one scenario that I went to college with. It played out with us. So we married young, and it was almost, if you weren't married when you finished college, that was the question. Growing up where we did, why aren't you married? And then when you get married, the next question is, when are you having kids? And I think I thought that's what everyone did. They got married in college until I realized, wait, there are different cultures, there are different contexts that people grow up in that look very different. But that's our story.
Well, you guys sent a bunch of questions, so we're going to get after the questions in a moment. And Ben and Shauna asked that we introduce ourselves so you know a little bit about our story. So Kelly and I have been married for 18 years. We've lived in San Francisco for 12. And you've probably seen some of the older kids in the church running around with their soccer jerseys. They're all playing soccer today. So there are kids. So if you see the soccer players running around, we're not a baseball family, we're a soccer family. And so they're all out playing soccer. But Kelly, why don't you talk a little bit about your story leading into marriage?
So I actually am a product of going into being 8 years old and knowing what marriage was not. So I don't know if you guys can relate to me with me on that. But at 8 years old, my father had an affair actually with my aunt. It was like the days of our lives started early for me, the soap opera stuff. But the same year, the good news is I found the Lord, and He started to work on me, even at an early age, as to, I've designed you for marriage, you're going to cling to me, you're going to trust me first, and then I'll do the rest. And so just growing up, I had two issues, unforgiveness and healthy, commitment. So I was the one that dated everybody and was great friends with everybody, and found out on the date who could I set them up with next. Like, no commitment for me, because I wasn't. Actually, at most of our wedding court, Kenny had dated all of them because I set them up. A lack of commitment, but I was trusting the Lord, and I knew He designed me for something greater, and not to be alone, and to find my, as we say, my prince, as we talk to our girls about. And then the lack of forgiveness, I just, at an early age, 13 years old, I took my stepmother, who used to be my aunt, and to lunch at Chili's, and I said, I just want to let you know I forgive you for messing up my family. Basically, I said that in a 13-year-old way. And she basically looked at me, and I said, well, this isn't for you, it's for me. And so I was totally set free, and I think I was ready to fly at that point and keep growing in the Lord. And I wanted to see what marriage was, so I was getting around people who just seemed like they got it right. They weren't perfect, but I wanted to be around couples that were searching after the Lord together, hand in hand, same goals, purposes, children and healthy children. And the Lord so graciously provided people in my life purposefully, I believe, and just covered me and allowed me to walk with people and see that marriage is good, and I want it. And then there was this guy that we were best friends, and we were playing tennis any chance we could, going for TCPY yogurt afterwards, but we were really good friends. And I'll let Kenny tell you the next story.
When you heard her strategy, she set me up with her friends, and I'd go on a date but then look back to her. So it is a strategy. If you Google it, it's under Kelly Bundy, because she is actually a Bundy first. So, I'm just kidding. Guys, she is, her maiden name is Bundy, so she's Kelly Bundy. We were at college, and people would call up and go, are you the real Kelly Bundy? Now, some of you don't know what that is, but there was a show back in the day.
There's Ted Bundy, so I think I'd go with,
We'll go with the Kelly.
Yeah, Kelly Bundy.
No, I grew up opposite, and I grew up in a wonderful home. So, when you lay things out and you go, who had the better starting point? I had the better starting point. And I think it's very important for us to remember that we all start at different points in time. Comparison is a very dangerous thing. And so each of us start in a different place. But Kelly started in a place. You heard that she found forgiveness and commitment. And here we are. But I started in Brazil. My parents were missionaries, and I grew up in Brazil, South America, and I came back to the United States to finish high school. And that was a very complicated time of my life. And during that time, I was discovering who I was. But for me, it was never a question whether marriage was going to play into my future or not, because I had already made the decision that the framework of marriage was not just about me being complete with another person, but it was really the context by which that we could go out and do the things we were meant to do in life. But I like what you said, Ben, that it's a lot more complicated to do it than to think it. Because I'm a selfish person, if left just to myself. Then I have past issues. The Bible talks about principalities and strongholds, and the more you get to know about Christ, you realize you're wrestling through stuff that you had nothing to do with. You're wrestling through stuff that was already there, kind of in the lineage of your life. And so, but Kelly and I met right after the her 13th year of life. So you heard her talk about forgiving her stepmother, but she and I was home during the summer, and we used to stay in this little apartment, and I saw this girl playing basketball. And so I'm walking around the neighborhood, and I'm on a visit. We start playing basketball, and that was my first contact with Kelly. So if you can imagine how God works, I'm home from Brazil, short-term trip. She's just forgiven her stepmother, which I knew nothing about. And she's out playing basketball with a few other people, and that's where we met. And then several years later, I came back, finished high school, and she did set me up with all her friends, which you can Google the strategy. And here we are 18 years later, and we're still in the process of becoming who we're meant to be and finding our identity. Did I forget you now?
Well, later, I'll add something. Later on, I found out that Kenny's parents had been praying for his future wife since the day he was born. And I really feel like there was a covering on my life, and I'm thankful to this day for them. And so I wanted to...
Well, I didn't thank you because I did forget something. So not only did my parents pray for Kelly, we pray for our children's spouses, because they're out there somewhere. You know, we talked to our son Chase just the other day, and I said, "What do you hope for?" And he goes, "Well, I hope she's playing soccer." Because, you know, we form identities as families, right? Families are about identities. But I do need to tell you this. My dad grew up in a broken home. And so while I grew up in a wonderful home, I do need to make this point. He grew up in a broken home. His dad was an alcoholic, a home filled with lies and secrets. And his dad died in his bed when he was 10. And that's a beautiful picture of redemption, because I never knew that. That wasn't the world I knew. But I knew two things. My father was committed to God, and he was committed to the truth. Even if you can't commit to God, I pray that today you would leave and commit to the truth. I do believe this. The essence of marriage is honesty. And if we can create households where the truth is told, 90% of the issues we deal with go away. And so I'm very thankful. And Corey and I were at the retreat not long ago, and his grandfather worked for an organization, started an organization. And in that organization is a man who's a high-up principal of the organization, and he was my father's youth pastor. Here we are in San Francisco, on a retreat not long ago. I find out that Corey's grandfather is connected to the man who gave my father the inspiration for what a family would look like. And so he had a picture, and he had resolve, and here we are. So while I grew up in a good home, I want you to know we were one generation removed from a tragic group. So thanks for
That's good. And that's one of the reasons why we're doing this thing together. It's one of the reasons why we do small groups. It's one of the reasons why Shauna and I hosted married couples in our home. Because we believe it's a together thing. And when we aren't in it together, and I don't mean together like husbands and wife together, I mean like us together, even the singles that are in this room. The reason why we do this together is because we miss the links to what's really special about each other if we stay isolated, not just as individuals, but as couples. And so one of the reasons I'm glad you guys are here is because I want you to go, hey, there's going to be some conversations go down at lunch today, and you're going to walk away with hopefully better friends or newer friends than when you came here. The first thing for us is like, why marriage? Why, especially in a culture, even here, where we have tons of singles. In fact, when we began to think about planting this church in downtown, my thought was, Shauna, are you cool? We're probably going to have a singles-dominated church, and that's just something that we have lots and tons of singles in our church, which we love. And the married couples thing has really surprised us in a real positive way, I would say. So why marriage? Let me give you this one resource. We'll give you a few resources, but one is The Meaning of Marriage from Tim Keller. And what's really cool is that as we were talking around, I guess we had lunch together on Thursday just to kind of just shore up our presentation for this morning, we were just talking about why marriage. Like what, before we get into the questions, why marriage? What's the significance? What's the purpose? And really we were just beginning to talk, it's this big idea that really in God's creating design for us as humans, He's creating so much and He's just going, it's good, it's good, it's good. And He creates man, it's good. And then He recognizes there's one thing that's not good. I mean, it's really an odd thing. Let me tell you the way Keller says this. He says in Genesis 1 and 2, as God was creating the world, He looked at what He had done and repeatedly said that it was good. This assessment is given 7 times in the first chapter alone, emphasizing in the strongest possible manner how great and glorious the created material world is. It is striking then that after God created the first man, He said, "It is not good that the man should be alone." It is striking not just by contrast with all we have read so far, but it raises a question. How could Adam be in a not good condition when he was in a perfect world and had evidently a perfect relationship with God? Think about that. Everything around him is what? Starts with a G. Everything is good. Him and God, there is no sin, meaning there's no separation. And yet God, not Adam, initially, we know that he's going to see some things that aren't good and go for the tree. But God, not Adam. Adam's not the one who recognizes that there's something wrong, right? Usually we're the ones who recognize what's wrong. God's pretty cool with the way things are, otherwise I think you would change much of it, right? God says in 2:18 of Genesis, He says, it is not good for man to be alone. So here is Adam, created by God, and put into the Garden of Paradise. Keep that in mind, paradise. And yet his aloneness is not good. What would be bad about being in paradise? Nothing, right? Anybody feel like they live in paradise? What would be bad about being in paradise? Nothing, except for the fact that God says it's not good. So the Genesis narrative is implying that our intense relational capacity, created and given to us by God, was not fulfilled completely by our vertical relationship with Him. Which is interesting because it sounds very spiritual to say that if I have God, I have enough. Right? And there's a sense in which that is true. But God's the one, not man, not woman, God's the one who proclaims, hey, you and I, not enough. Isn't that interesting? It's very interesting to me. It said God designed us to need horizontal relationships with other human beings. That is why even in paradise, loneliness was a terrible thing. Isn't that crazy? Even in paradise, the one place that if you and I could live there, we think we've been to some cool places, right? Resorts that are all-inclusive, cruises, sometimes in Hawaii, wherever's your favorite spot. Like, this is paradise, not compared to the garden. He's in paradise. He's going, the reason it's not good, and we believe in this huge communal thing. So when you have God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. So when we say that God created humans because He wanted someone He could love, false. Because there's this infinite love relationship going on between the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And so what marriage is designed to reflect, what it's designed to mirror, really is that communal relationship. By saying that, of course the question comes in, and one of the questions has come in, why do we not talk more about, why isn't this not called a singleness 2.0 experience? And we could have that in the future. Hopefully just the single people would attend that, and you married people wouldn't be looking for a way to get there. Why is it? Because we know that there's a time where Paul says that he wishes that the people who are single would remain single like he is, and claims for it to be good. And again, without getting to a theological discourse this morning that's not related to this, remember that because of what Paul was doing with his life and what he sensed and what he felt like God had for him, he is saying, this is good for me. And if you're wired like me, it is good for you too. And so this is not hey, marriage is number one and singleness is somewhere else. It's that God created us in His image and that He created us for this. Any thoughts on that, just the why marriage thing from you guys before we launch into the questions?
because God is sovereign and He knows all, and He knew in the garden that day that it was not good for man to be alone. He knew what the future was going to be like, and He structured the world in such a way, and relationships in such a way, that by Adam having a companion to do life with, it was going to reveal more of who God was. And I think even in the garden, God did not want man to be alone for the purpose of, Adam, I want you to experience life with someone else. It makes life so much better. But by experiencing life with someone else, it's going to make me all the more greater.
I would also add that we're better together. I guess I'm great by myself and he's great by himself, but together we're awesome and we can do so much more. And I just think that that's the way we're designed, and I know it because I've experienced it. That doesn't mean it was easy to get there, but.
Well, it's great to have that picture, right? Because if you look at the genesis of it, the beginning of it, and you see the design, you go, okay, work is not bad, because in the garden, the first assignment was work. So we're going to talk a little bit about why marriage takes so much work, because it is hard work. But we see in the garden that work's good, because God is creating as an act of identity. And then I love that God shows this sense of spontaneity, where He's spontaneous. He's on the fly. On the fly, He's making a new decision, which is, hey, it's not good for him to be alone. Let's make an adjustment here. Well, that happened in the garden. And I think that's good news to know that God is not rigid. And it's not a formula. It's not an equation that can't be adjusted. And so that relationship that happened, I wonder if God, in the original thought, said, well, Adam will be in relationship with us. And the us being God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And then realizes, no, we need to make sure Adam has a relationship for him. And all of this happens, like you said, in paradise. And then the piece of the puzzle that's not mentioned in Keller's, which I love too, is that failed leadership happened in paradise. That's an interesting observation because, we can talk about that some other time or maybe in smaller groups, but failed leadership on somebody's part.
And it didn't happen after the kids came.
No.
Which is huge, right? There was no stress. We're clear? There was no stress. There were no other people to come against the refuge they had within their relationship initially. And not only that, you also think about the big idea that for Adam to get to the intimacy that he would enjoy with Eve, it cost him something, right? I don't know how valuable that rib was, but it cost Adam something to get there. And I think that's one of the themes that we'll be talking about. And we've already alluded to it. And it'll be fun to see how this shapes up even as we go along this morning. But this big idea that we've all seen terrible marriages, right? Anybody? Some of us have lived in terrible marriages. Hopefully those are either better now or your next one will be. And I think one of the things is, why, if it's so much work, what's the big deal? And we can either launch into questions or we can begin this discussion. But why, we're all willing to work for something that we value in a certain way, right? It can be the dollar for sure. It can be a status. It can be to provide for our family. We're all, right? And a lot of what you're going to hear from all four of us, and we'll say it different ways, is this thing I've taught you guys about, this values-based decision making. At the end of the day, and even with this series we're on, you guys remember how we said this past Sunday, and of course you don't, but if you see on the video, what I said this past Sunday, we said that you can't serve two masters because you'll be devoted to money or to God. In the end, one of those things are eventually going to come to a head, and something has to win. And that's what you'll hear us talk a lot about today. Not money so much, although we'll talk about marriage and money. But just in the end, something's got to be tops, right? And so we hope to help you guys think through your values-based decision making. The big idea is, what are your values? ... Really. We know what the Bible says on a lot of things. We're going to give you guys scripture where that's appropriate this morning. But that doesn't mean we value it just because we should. We know what our wife would like for us, our husband or our future husband or wife would like for us to value. And so we may have that written down on paper, but we don't really value that. In the end, there's always going to be things that go up against each other. That's what much of our answers are going to be about to your questions and our questions to your questions. In the end, something has to win. And the only way this wins is if the value gets elevated. in our minds and actually in our hearts, and of course with the other person who we'll be involved with one day or we're involved with today. And so I think the values-based stuff really does come into play when we talk careers, when we talk about money in a little bit, when we talk about sex, when we talk about, oh, you're like, yeah, we're going to. And it's going to be a volunteer-based, though. It's going to be awesome. But in the end, something wins. There is a value that always wins, right? I want to be a great husband. But when I'm at the restaurant with Shauna the other night and playoff baseball is on TV, I couldn't invite myself to her side of the table, but she invited me, which was awesome. So we got to kind of enjoy both. But in the end, seriously, something's got to win. And what this is about is making sure that this always wins. This always wins. And for this to win, marriage, then she's got to win. Now, hopefully she's giving me the same big attitude. But what we want to do is help you guys get to a place where this really wins in your mind. So we're not lying like I've done in the past and saying, Shauna, you're most important to me, when really the thing that was driving me that whole week was to be an awesome pastor and to see God grow this church. So you're not lying to your wife or husband now or in the future when you say to them, no, work really isn't that important as you are. And you're going to do it. Just something always wins. So
I think you see it beautifully played out going back to Genesis 2, where, metaphorically speaking, when God removed the rib from Adam and created Eve, he brought Eve beside Adam. Not for Eve to follow in line behind Adam because she was created second, but for Eve to come alongside Adam and for them to have a relationship together. And I think we win when we are doing life beside each other. But there are times when I expect more of him and I want him to be ahead of me and to go for things while I just sit on the sidelines. And then there's other times where I want to run ahead and win the prize by myself and put myself first, and then we lose again. But the way God intended it from the very beginning is for husband and wife to come beside each other and do life together as a team. And when we're doing it that way and we're following God's lead, that's when marriage works.
Well, I'll just share one thing. Chase's third grade teacher told us one day in our teacher conference, math is hard. Quit telling him this is easy, you can do it. Come on, we have half an hour. And she looked at us, didn't she? She said, math is hard. And Kenny and I were talking on the way over here, let's change that word work into effort or commitment. Like, you're committed to this. It's not work, like you can go work a job and not be committed to it, you know. So you can work at this and be just give your 110% effort, your commitment, and then see the fruit. Your fruit, his A this past report card in algebra didn't come because he didn't. We were like, you need to put effort in this. You need to be committed to this. You've got to understand this, and we kind of changed our paradigm. It's hard. It sure is hard, but it's worth it. The fruit will come.
And connecting the dots, you know, it is hard work. And so we're going to be talking a lot about for what, you know, marriage for what. And to Shauna's point around the side by side, one of the reasons why marriage begins to fall apart is because, in my opinion, we may have two different targets, right? So marriage is not about doing by itself, just doing things. Marriage is very much about our identity. So if you look at marriage as who you are, so tell me who I am, right? That's the series we're in. Marriage is very much about my identity. And I think way too often we leverage marriage to accomplish things we want. And culturally, we have to step back and go, okay, what's the healthy balance between the private world of my identity fueling the public world of the things I do? And so, you know, as we talk today, remember that we are saying we believe marriage is very much not just about what we receive from it, but it being about who we are. Generations down the road, a successful marriage ought to influence the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren. And the identity of that marriage is going to have far greater value than the things I did. You follow me? So to your point, that side by side, the partnership, the completion, the moving forward together. the doing just happens from a healthy identity.
Well, you guys ready to tackle some questions? Yeah? You guys can stand up and stretch at any time. Anytime that you want to. Well, hey, let's get into really talking about some values stuff and decision making and different things. So here's one. How should careers and career opportunities factor into one's marriage? What should be approach-wise? What are some good rhythms on this? What do you guys think? It's always great to be the question answer. This is so fun.
I like how you looked at me.
I'm going all Barbara Walters. What do you guys think? What do you know? What do I think? We did all four give each other permission to throw it back, but at some point in time, the eighth time, you have to actually answer. Again, I think this goes back to a lot of values-based stuff, and I think this. I think careers, as you mentioned, in the garden, God gives work, and so, man, I value work. I hope that you value work. I hope for work's sake in some ways. Like this, I think we're going to work in eternity. Again, not that we're talking about that this morning. I think work is what God made us to do, right? But again, when it comes even to God who made work, sees it as a very good thing. Do you know that even like I talked to you about values, that something wins when they rub up against each other? I think for God the same thing is true, right? I think relationship always wins over work with God. There's no doubt. I mean, just look at the scriptures. If work was number one, Jesus never would have been interrupted on his way to accomplish something really grand, right? His buddy Lazarus is dead. The thing that he came to work on is to basically bring people to new life. And this is the time he's going to do it physically. But he waits, right? Because he wants to teach something relationally and because he's doing something else. I think that's a huge deal. So when it comes to this, you just need to be honest. What's number one in my life? Even if you don't have the career you want. Like what is the driving factor in my life? And I talk to people all the time. That's why I know this is true. Who say to me, Ben, if I had to be honest, work is number one. And these are people that are married and some that are dating and some that aren't dating. And they're just honest about that. And so I think you got to start where you are. So honesty is good. But I think how do you make that shift? And then we'll get into how do you even choose career? How do you know what career will be helpful and healthy for your kids? And maybe talk about seasons, because we've all, depends on what season of our marriage we've been in that we could do, even for yourself. Some of the things you can do now that maybe you would have been unwise to do before.
Not trying to chase a rabbit here, but just a twist on this as I think back to when we were dating and getting serious and thinking, is this who you have for me, God? And the troublesome part, the part that I couldn't, or the battle that was going in my mind is, I really wanted to do ministry. I wanted to be on the mission field. I really thought that I was going to be overseas doing social justice and things like that. And so when Ben enters the picture and his degree is in social work, I'm thinking, God, that's not lining up. Like, I know that we've got this great relationship, but we want two different things, two different career paths. And so for me, it was a struggle of, God, I'm going to have to choose, just like you're talking about. I was going to have to choose. At the end of the day, one was going to win out. But the peace that God gave me in that, Shauna, I have created you. This is the relationship I have for you. And when I came to believe that this is who, God, you have for me, then I'm just going to have to trust you with the plan you have ahead of us. And if it's overseas, okay. If it's doing something else, if it's him working at a hospital, whatever it might be, I believe first and foremost that you have us for each other. And then I'm just going to trust you with where you're going to take us in life. And I think the beautiful thing and the redemptive thing we've seen throughout our marriage is that wherever he has us serving and working, it's never against each other. He's never pulling me one way and Ben another way in our careers. God, because he created marriage, he's going to create your career paths to be parallel and work beside each other as opposed to being opposite of each other.
Well, I think you have to deconstruct the parts, right? So as you're listening to us, you're probably hearing 3 or 4 good things working against each other. So remember that career and work, if we're honest about what we said in the garden, is also part of our identity, right? Everybody kind of agree with that, or at least thinking about it? So if it is a part of your identity, how do you reconcile this partnership your family and your career. When I was a young man, before I started to follow Christ, I accepted Christ as a kid, but I didn't follow Christ until I was out of the house working for Levi Strauss & Company. And I traveled the world, and I'm on an airplane. There were no cell phones, but sat phones at that time, so you can realize how decompartmentalized life was. I mean, I had compartments. And I looked around, and only 2 men I worked with still had their marriage. And that had a profound impact on me as a young man, because I'm making decisions. I go to my first hotel, I'm taken to my room, the person has his hand out for the tip and says, hey, I can arrange company tonight. All right, so I've got a decision to make.
Who's going to bring some buddies over?
Yeah.
I mean, it's always good to have poker friends, man.
Let's be clear, it wouldn't be his buddies. And they certainly wouldn't love me. It would be work for them. But the point being, okay, so I had a personal decision about my character. I wasn't married yet, okay? But when you look at your career, the question is, how do we navigate this career thing in a world where our career no longer is the farm or the shoemaking or the function? It used to be that everything happened together. Would you agree with me on that? And so it is hard work, because in a marriage now, you're navigating that career. And I do believe it's more challenging today than ever, because you can easily live 2 separate lives. And if you look at your friendships, many of them are doing really well at work, very poorly at home. Because it's easier, in my opinion, to do well in the corporate world, where I live. And that's a point of tension. So I think the question is a fair question, but I do believe we also have to look at the landscape. And I love sports. I play sports to this day. I'm a tennis player. And when I'm getting beat by somebody, I have to look at my opponent, and I can work harder, but I also need to make some adjustments. And I think when you begin to make those adjustments together, often you put the career in the right spot. To your point, your value proposition suggests that the career is stronger when you go together as a partnership. Does that make sense? Any questions come out of that?
And I think there are seasons of things too, right? I mean, we knew coming into starting a new church that I was going to have to work my tail off. No doubt, right? I mean, listen, this thing doesn't exist. And so we knew that, but I also wanted to make sure that I was working on things, because what's true, even when you have kids, even if your time, and I know at the end of the day, I think time is certainly something to look to, but there are times in which Shauna, and we'll talk about kids and romance and that in a little bit, even when I started having kids and they were so needy, especially on her, we still had to be number one for each other. It didn't mean that I got 30 hours every week like I used to. I might not get any hours, and vice versa. But I do think that there are some things that are seasonal, and in those moments we have to ask, is this a heart issue or is it just a reality issue? And is it for a bounded time? And I also think one of the things that's helpful with any career stuff is just writing out, what are my non-negotiables for my career? You need to have those. Hopefully they're things like integrity. Hopefully they're things like doing something God gave me a passion about. If we can't get there, let's get there as soon as we can. But also in regards to your relational stage, marriage, engagement, single, whatever, you need to know what some non-negotiables are regarding your career, and you need to make sure that those things are probably agreed upon. I think it is this idea of agreement. Shauna gives me great permission and encouragement to work hard. Does that make sense? And it doesn't mean when I have to do something late at night, and we'll talk about our playbook and things like that later, but you give me great permission to work hard. You understand. But if 13 nights in a row, if I continue to choose something besides her, it doesn't matter how important our work is. It's not that important, although we've made it more important.
Yeah, and in this conversation, I think we could probably spend 3 hours on it. Because this one right here, many of us have $250,000 to $500,000 tied into our education, right? And then all of a sudden you get married and you're talking about adjusting that. A moment ago I was highlighting how challenging it is to work a job that's detached from your private world. But here's something simple. In our marriage, Kelly and I, as we have the 3 kids, we started to discover that the answer to why we work was helpful to the formation of our marriage. Does that make sense? Why do I work? So are you working for your identity, or are you working for provision? Because that's an important answer. There's nothing wrong, so we have to work for provision, but your identity may be different. So then we begin to look at what things can we do together. And something as simple as Saturday mornings, 8 to 10, working on the house together. Crank up the music, we're doing all the chores together. All of a sudden, we put work at the center of our family. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay, so then a second example is we began to look at the things we're good at, and we asked ourselves, where can we do it for free? I think that's why we love being at Epic, because we get to be here together. As a family, we all sign up to serve on the same day because it works out a little better than everybody's, volunteering at different points. That together work. And so just know this, the culture is not working for your marriage, it's working against your marriage. I don't think the culture wakes up and says we want to destroy marriage. The culture is just moving in the direction it's moving. You have to take some time and go, how do I integrate work together in my marriage? And you'll begin to align your own career, in my opinion, by doing that. So in our marriage, Kelly can talk to this, but right now she's full-time stay-at-home. Please understand, this is a woman with incredible capacity, incredible potential, and as soon as the children are in a particular place, she has specific aspirations. That was a negotiated part of our marriage. And you begin to make those decisions together, where you don't discount somebody's career or diminish, you just put it in the right position.
Well, let's move into the realm of finances, start dropping some bombs here. A few of the questions we got, and then we can kind of hammer out in any order. One is just a real simple one that could be not so simple. Is it okay to have different checking accounts, so different kind of, they got their money kind of operating like, maybe more like roommates in some ways, if that's the case? Not that I'm giving my opinion yet, the question. What is the right way to do finances as a couple? Should everything be shared? What are some good ways to discuss finances, especially if you're used to having separate accounts? And so maybe we start with why separate accounts or a joint account, and then how to have those discussions and arrive at decisions from there.
All right.
You want it? Okay, whatever.
No, I always am the guy who goes, why? I mean, if you can give me a good answer, then that's a great starting point. On one hand, you go, of course we want to trust each other. But I've also been a full-time paid pastor, and I can't tell you how many times at the table where the marriage is on the line, the spouse finds out they had 2 or 3 extra accounts somewhere else. So I see money as this perfect opportunity to make decisions together. So for Kelly and I, we everything we have is in one place, but we live in a world of technology where she may put money in an envelope for me, and she may have money in an envelope for her. So what we're not suggesting is that we both don't have control over money and decision-making power, but we don't let money lay as the foundation of our relationship. Our decisions, our agreements, our direction rules over the money. The money is a resource. And so back to the question, why would you want separate accounts? I think it comes down to trust or separate objectives. I think we should be talking about the separate objectives or the lack of trust, not necessarily money. Money's just a tool. Now, maybe I got too esoteric on that.
No, I think that's good. I mean, for Sean and I, and what we believe that the Bible teaches, this idea of one flesh, this big idea of marriage is two becoming one. And so we believe there's enough that goes against us to separate us, right? Just kind of like we're talking about, whether it's my job, whether it's parenting styles that are different, because sometimes we're different on that. We believe that there's enough that comes against us, so we want to try to find how can we make as many things, if not all things, merging into one, or at least getting us there. Again, there's some freedom in there for us when it comes to finances. When Shauna goes shopping, I don't know why she likes buying gifts for so many people. I'm just like, why are you doing that?
Kelly.
You want to put a plug in for your...
That's right. We'll do that. But But for Shauna, when she looks at how I spend the money, I would rather go out and eat a nice meal, whereas she would rather go shopping. Well, so it's not that we're on the same page totally. That's why we have to work that out. But it ends up being better in the long run because we have some things to flesh out. And the big idea of marriage is to really denounce selfishness and get us away from selfishness. And I think, unless you've got great reasons, again, you can have great answers to the why question, but it seems to me that separate accounts would just breed selfishness. It would make it easier to become, if the goal of marriage, and I think it is, what we're going to say this morning, and I hope you've heard it already, is that marriage reveals something that singleness cannot reveal. Okay? And no matter, you will not know the depth of your selfishness until you're married. You just won't. Like, even if you go, oh, but Ben, I'm sure you are unselfish, but I'm just saying, we said that marriage reveals selfishness, at least in our lives and every other marriage that I know of, and I'll speak, yes, every other, I feel that strongly about it. It reveals selfishness like nothing else can. Why? Because I can go on a mission trip and feel very unselfish. I can show up and lead a small group 1 hour a week and then go back to my home alone and feel very unselfish. Does that make sense? But marriage is going to reveal selfishness in a way that nothing else does. And so what you're going to hear thematically, think about that idea versus the values-based decision-making I've been talking to you guys about. So you're here with a lot of questions is, how can we, if the goal of marriage isn't just to make me happy, but actually to build my character and make me more God-like, more Christ-like, then I need to find all the avenues to do it. And I think that's a complex one, but it's also the most logical one that's tangible, that I can see, hey, this is just a simple way for us to get closer to becoming one, just by sharing these things. Now, do we always have the same values when it comes to our money? No. Shauna doesn't know why I would want to spend money to go buy a playoff ticket. I'm like, of course you can watch it at home. Anyway, we're not going to do this before you guys, I promise. But there are things. So it's not that, hey, having one account makes it. Remember, the answer to all the marriage questions about leaving unselfishness and two becoming one, it's never because that's the easy answer, because the easy answer is to keep them separate. The easy answer is for you to pay half rent, I pay half rent, what I do with the rest is up to me. That's the easy answer. But we're not going after easy, right? It costs Adam, it's going to cost us, but the beautiful thing is it's worth it. And early on in our marriage, maybe I would have told you it was worth it, and that could have been a lie early on. Right? I mean, that just, is it worth it is the question I was asking in the early days. Like, why? I'm like, man, I'm a Christian, I can't get out of this. And I didn't really want to, I mean, that's not, but it was just like, why is it like this? You know, but it just, I shared with some leaders last Friday night just this principle of sowing and reaping. I just think it's beautiful to get to the reaping years of marriage. And I don't think you have to wait 12 years, maybe like we did, or however many they would say when they begin to go into the sweet spot. But I do believe what you sow as a single person and what you sow as a married person, you're going to reap. And so the question is, what are we sowing? You know, Ken and I have both recently been changing the way that we eat. That sucked in the beginning. Like, why would you eat Brussels sprouts if you can have chocolate cake? I mean, it still doesn't make sense, really.
And why aren't our bodies working with us?
Exactly. Why isn't
burn that off?
Yeah, why isn't the easy stuff profitable for us? But once we begin to see, and we're very close relationally, the four of us, so let me say that first of all. But once we begin to see the change, it's like, man, I want to keep sowing because we're getting to reap some good stuff, you know? Like, I'm actually going to be able to take my shirt off next time we go to Hawaii. It's going to be awesome. But I do think sowing and reaping in the financial realm and in every realm of marriage is a great principle.
But you made a point in there that I want to highlight. So, conflict. When you hear the word conflict, good or bad?
Be honest.
Just in your spirit.
Good.
See, notice how we're not in agreement there. Kelly, conflict, good or bad when we first got married?
Bad.
Why do you think conflict was bad for her? She saw conflict, but here's the thing. Unresolved conflict is bad. Okay? So sometimes it's just easier to not have conflict and give separate accounts. Right? When we look at money, sometimes it's just easier to do that, but you lose. Because you didn't wrestle through a decision that allowed you to together. See, a decision made together allows you to win or lose together. Okay? And if we fail, we get back up on the horse. You don't get knocked off, you get back up. Here's an example, very practical. Kelly has the gift of giving. Okay, do you guys want to put a plug into your thing here? Later they'll tell you about something they're doing. And I love that gift. But typically, Kelly, I run the finances in our house. Or at least I thought I did for a while. And now we do it together. And so we had a point where nobody was running the finances, quite honestly. And so maybe you've been there in your marriage where it just happens and you realize somebody's got to do it. So I took charge of it. And every time Kelly wanted to be generous, what do you think? Do you think we were flush in the account or down in the account? We were down. So then what would I do? I would go, Kelly, you can't do that. There's no way we can afford that. Now, was I being truthful? If the money's not in the account, the only way to be generous is to go into debt. True? All right, so what we had to do there was move into conflict. Now, conflict, good or bad? See, for she and I, we had to get the conflict thing down in order to have this conversation. Well, today, if you come into our garage, there's an entire wall of gifts. I mean, there's bins with different types of gifts for people because we figured out how to budget generosity. It wasn't about the money, it was about me valuing Kelly and her gift. So after Christmas, we love taking all the gift cards we get, and divvying up the ones, and then we budget some extra money because if you've ever shopped after Christmas, everything's 70% off. And you start buying gifts for the year. It's a great thing. So now we're being generous, not only Kelly, but our family together. Now, if we had just created separate accounts and she had to work hard to have the money to be generous, not only would she accomplish that, but she would accomplish that alone. But the conflict of it brought us to a place where we're together. And now I'm excited about this. I got to figure out how to put onto Facebook this event you guys are throwing on. It's like this marketplace deal where you can do Christmas shopping in October. It's pretty cool. And that kind of thing excites me. Now, if you had met me 10 years ago, you wouldn't think I was a generous person. Today, I love generosity because Kelly's influenced that. It's a very practical example. I mean, would you add anything?
Yeah, I should definitely chime in. Because when we got married, I bounced our baker's check for our cake. So we started with, we're definitely on different pages here because, of course, I was giving tips and being very generous and sanguine and crazy, and he's like, whoa. So we had to get around people that knew how to budget. We had to set goals together. We had to say, if we save this much, we may be able to buy a house, and we had to. But coming from where I grew up, there was no order at all. It was just like the Christmas gifts just showed up. My dad worked hard. He paid my mom the weekend, whatever, alimony or whatever. But I had no idea. So there is hope if you're bouncing checks and just get that order and make agreements. And I have to also chime in that Kenny is actually more generous than I am now. We have rubbed off on each other. I'm more, are you sure we need to do this? And he's like, yes, we need to get more. And so it's really interesting how marriage does that.
And I think back to what you said on a previous question is we can't go for two different targets. And I think when your money is separate, you're aiming at two different things rather than coming together and deciding what your values are together. And unless you grew up in the same house, which you didn't, you're going to have two totally different ways of handling money and seeing how money was handled. And I think for me, going back to conflict, my parents went to the room, closed the door to have discussions, arguments. So I never saw it lived out. And so when we had conflict with money day one, I'm like, I don't know, let's just put this under the rug and not talk about it. That was my way, whereas Ben grew up where, no, if there's an issue, you're going to talk about it. And so it was the kind of thing, either we make this easy and just avoid it and don't even talk about it or discuss it, or this is going to be hard. I'm probably going to cry a lot, and he's going to throw his hands up in the air not knowing what to do with me. But we had to have conflict in order to have peace and where we are today.
Yeah, tomorrow I'll be talking about success, and one of the things that you'll hear me say in my introduction tomorrow is I absolutely love to win. Like if somebody's like, hey, Ben, you go through this door, I go through that door, and whoever makes it upstairs first wins, I'm in, and I think I'm going to win. So I love to win. Anyway, you'll hear it tomorrow. I just love to win, and you love to win too. So the great thing, sometimes what we think we have to do, if we give up our individualism, if we give up our own rights, we think we have to lose to have a good marriage. Does that make sense? And in some ways, maybe that's true, but listen, take your desire for winning and just funnel it through what is the win for us. Does that make sense? Like not what is the win for me. If that's your attitude, don't get married. But it'd be hard to even follow Christ if that's your attitude, just being straight with you. I think to begin to ask the question, what is the win for us? What I used to, early days of marriage, I wanted to know what the win was for me. And so whenever I had to do something that was sacrificial, that was a loss. Whenever I had to do something that I wasn't interested in, I lost again. But now that I want us to win, I want this thing, this unit, this marriage that Shauna and I have, I want it to win, then I'm willing to shift things that before would have been lost to me. I now see those things as gain because it helps us win. And fellas, if you want a great wife that's going to love you well and all of those kind of things, you need to think through the lens, how do we win? How do we win? And for you to think, how do we win? I have to think, what is the win for her? Ladies, the same thing, but I'll let them speak to that. But when you begin to think about winning in your marriage, then things that I used to think were terrible sacrifices, I just set aside and go, you know what? This is going to make us better. If I hang with the kids while she goes to spend time with ladies, that used to be a loss for me. Man, I don't get free time. Got to watch a cartoon, got to eat pizza or chicken nuggets. I did not have too much, but I used to think of that as a loss, and now I see that as a win. Why is it a win? Because Shauna, who goes to have this outlet with the girls that are investing in her life, it's going to make her a better wife. It's going to make her a better mom. I won't tell you all the other ways we could win because of those things, but I'm going to win, and we're going to win together. And I just think you have to begin to shift the question, hey, I'm not losing here, but what's the win for our marriage? And when you begin to think like that, it will affect the career, it will affect the money, it will affect how you do vacation, how you do the in-law thing. We'll talk about that. It will affect everything when you ask, hey, what's the win for us? And then I also think you have to be careful, Ken and Kelly and Shauna, with culture. You also don't want anything outside of the unit being able to affect your decision to go for the win. A lot of you are going to have to cut ties with your mom and dad because they're trying to force how you do the holidays. They don't factor into what's the win for you. If it affects them, awesome. If it affects them once every 2 years, that's your call. What's the win for you and I? Shauna and I have made this playbook thing recently because what we want to do is win. Well, some people are going to go, well, Ben, you're making us lose because you're saying you can only be gone this amount of times a week, or you guys have to go on this many date nights, you have to do this. Well, because at the core, the nucleus, it is us winning. And I'll do whatever I have to do as a pastor, father, husband to make sure that we win. And when I get out of alignment of that, I want people in my life, especially her, but others of you that I trust, bring me back into alignment. Because what's most important, I'm a better pastor if we win. I'm a better friend if we win. I'm a better father. That's why some of you need to understand, yes, God's first. And then when they go, well, then it's my wife and kids. No, it's your wife or it's your husband.
Ben, I'd like to add this. As I was reading through all the questions, I had one red flag. And I'm just going to give it to you because I think it's linked to money. And I think it's linked to winning. I think it's all of this, hopefully you see it interconnected. And if you need to keep deconstructing it, deconstruct it. You can put it back together. But there weren't many questions on decision making. Did I miss that?
Sure.
There really weren't. There weren't many questions about how do we make decisions together. And I think you're hearing from us up here that money has a lot to do with the manifestation of a decision made. And one of the great gifts of marriage is making together decisions. Not just the ones you have to make. Okay? You have a family member, a mom or a dad died today. You're going to have to make some decisions fast, right? Those are reactive decisions. But you have the power to make decisions together that create an outcome. And I think that's why Jesus talks so much about money, because money gave us a mirror image of a decision that was made. So we talked about Zacchaeus this week, and we talked about, and the reason why money was so prevalent there is because he had made a life decision early on that was manifested in his money. And by letting it go, he realigned to Jesus now. And now he's making new decisions. And the same is true in marriage. Do I have permission to kind of share about your father passing? So Kelly and I made a decision to move to San Francisco. And we came to San Francisco in 2001, back in the day where no one was coming to San Francisco to do church work or to do what we're doing today. It was a different day. We invited 1,000 people to a church service, one person came. The Soma District was not what it is today, just so everybody's clear. The Soma District is booming. Some of you are shaking your head, you remember. And I remember telling my father, Dad, Kelly and I made the decision to go. My father was being a good dad, and I said, Dad, you have taught me to trust God. You have taught me to step out in faith, and that's what I'm doing. And I will go to San Francisco with $100 in my pocket because my wife and I are clear that's what we should do. It was a powerful moment. Because you know that our marriage came alive on the other side of that decision where we let go of certain things. We stepped out in faith, and together here we are. Well, things got really tough after that. In 2003, our marriage almost reached the point of the word we said we would never share, which was, can we even do this? Is divorce an option? We can have that conversation later. So you get to your darkest hour. With that point, now we've got to make some adjustments. Now we're making decisions together. And we decide to give up what I had as a full paid salary as a pastor to start a business in San Francisco. Not sure that was a good idea, but we did it. And we also made a decision, because her father was ill, which is a whole other story, that we would not receive the inheritance from him at the expense of her brother. We don't have the time to go through all of this. So picture this, 2006 or 7, December. We have less than $2,500 in the bank. It's a fact. Her father passes away. She's the executor of the will. And there's near $1 million that's at our disposal. What do we do with it? We had already made a decision, and we had already communicated with him. We literally gave that to her brother. Now, we received some other things along the way, but you need to understand that that particular moment could have torn our marriage apart, right? Let's just say that we took the money. Nobody would have said anything was wrong with that, right? There's nothing wrong with it. We received the inheritance. Who knows how we would have fared out? But we had made a decision out of principle that family was more important than the money. And together, we released that back to her brother, which in our opinion, generations down the road, that's going to play out totally different than had we just taken the money. You see the power of decisions? Well, let me tell you, today we don't have $3,500 in the bank. We're doing just fine. We've been blessed beyond measure. But you know what's better than the money in the bank is that we had some wins. We had some wins together. So making together decisions is hard work, especially if you don't like conflict. Does that make sense? Making together decisions is hard work, and you're going to make decisions in your darkest hour and in your best hour. And you have to understand that coming back to the decision you made together is the key to success in marriage. Does that pose any questions, or you can raise your hand if you have a question about what I said.
I'm scared. I don't know what to say.
I have a score update before I start.
That's good.
No, when this whole conversation started, my question was a little different, which you kind of touched on just now, and that is more about, not so much about separate accounts, but more about the difference in risk tolerance, right? There's always one person who is comfortable living on the edge, and I'll be honest and say that's me. And then there's the other person who sees it completely differently, And so what are ways to me, that's a more central question than maybe the other things that you guys are talking about. How do you manage in a couple when one person's very conservative and wants to do one thing, and the other person is extremely risk?
Yeah, that's good. Tough. I'm with you, man. Hey, we were in a very safe position before this thing came online for us that we're doing now. Very safe. We had a 4-bedroom house that no one else had ever lived in. We had the neighborhood pool. I was making really good money to do not a whole lot of work. And we were in that, what they call the mega church world, where you got 25 pastors on staff. I teach once a week, and they're paying me well. And so I came to her with that idea, like, hey, risk is about to go way up. In fact, I'm trying to think of the most risky thing we could do. There are a lot of other places we could go, more likely to start church, and
You chose well.
and part of what was helpful for me is I had to make a list with her, but I needed to initiate it. Hey, what are the non-negotiables? No matter how big the risk is, what will I not give up? And there were a lot of things that we were willing to give up. I had to talk to her, like, listen, we may never own a home again. And that's absolutely still true this morning. We may not do this, we may not do that. But at home there, I had to make sure that that I was going to do whatever I could to help her thrive, because I've got to bring that to the table. You know, and so
I would add that in the decision to make the risk, and in our conversations to make the risk, he first and constantly was looking at me and saying, I value more than this risk, but I really want to do this risk. But he keeps saying, but I value you. So at any point I felt shaky or uncertain, we'd have to stop and talk about it. Or I remember there being like 10 days where I said, just give me 10 days to pray through this. So he valued me more than the risk. But because of that, it was much easier for me to say, okay, I don't know what's ahead of us, but I'm holding your hand as we go.
And I think the biggest thing too, Cesar, is because it's not just for her to be well taken care of, but for you to have the freedom to fly after that thing. If it's hugely risked, then I've got to make sure that this is awesome. If I'm going to go try to start something from scratch, or I'm going to go after that impossible thing, this has to be strong. And so it wasn't just, it was for her, but I'm willing to wait 3 months. I don't want to wait 3 years. That's just me. But I'm willing to wait 3 months if it takes her that long to get on board. And it took her some time. I was ready to run. And she had to come to grips with that. But I had to make sure that this was awesome because of what this that we're sitting in now was going to demand of me. I needed a place of strength to live out of, to pursue, so that I could have, I didn't want a yellow light. I wanted a green light because it was going to take a green light. And at the end of the day, it gets to that place where, and again, we don't need to talk the specifics of what the risk is for you guys in particular, but I think it's really looking at, hey, is it an all or nothing thing, or are there pieces of it? Can we slice this a different way? Either can I minimize the risk a bit, and if not, just be honest about that. And is there something I can do to help her feel like, hey, we're going to go. What I would do is Shauna, and I don't know if you can do this, but I would just talk to her, like take the spiritual stuff out, and I said, hey, here's the worst case scenario. We were at a big church. You know, you've had success and stuff before business-wise. And so I just said to her, hey, if it doesn't work, we can go get a job doing something else. You know? And so it's not spiritual at all. But I painted the worst possible picture and said, hey, if we end up there, I will hate it. You know, I haven't heard good things about Arkansas, but I'm kidding. I didn't really hear about Arkansas. But I'll be able to do something, okay? And the biggest thing that our wives need to know is that, hey, I'm going to give it all that I've got, and I'm going to create as safe a haven as I can for you. And so what the specifics of that are, I don't know. But.
You have anything you want to add? Well, I work in the corporate world as a performance coach, and I use the McQuaid studies to bring two people together and match personality profiles, right? And as you make decisions in a marriage, you learn how to make those decisions together.